What is going on, Liberty lovers? Welcome to another edition of the Liberty Cast, and I'm your host, Big E. So, is there a whole lot going on in the news right now? Oh, yeah. The left is pushing hard to defund the police. This is an epically bad idea, and we will explain why and how it actually fits into a larger plan. Terrorists have taken over a major city and basically secede from the Union.
Well, bye.
And once again, we talk about systemic racism, and this time I will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no such thing. We will get into all of that and more, and it starts right now. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Since the killing of George Floyd has sparked all these riots and social unrest, one of the biggest causes to come out of that, one of the things that they're pushing hardest on, is defunding the police. Defunding, or in some cases, disbanding the police. Now, here's my question. If you defund the police, and in some cases, as I said, disband the police, how can the left then argue that we can't have guns because all we have to do is call the police and they'll be there to protect us? How can you logically argue that without a police force, we should not be allowed the means to protect ourselves? This is one of the things we mean when we say the left doesn't think about what then, what next. Defunding the police means less officers on the street. It means less training for those officers. And training is the most important thing that the police department can do. They can ill afford to skimp on that. Another thing they want to do is, quote, demilitarize the police. And frankly, I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense either. I do understand this point. I do understand why some people might want to reduce the amount of military equipment available to police departments. It's one of the few arguments that I can understand that side. I just don't agree with it. And this is why. Because criminals, gangs, cartels all have access to a lot of that gear. They may not be able to get their hands on some armored personnel carriers like you see some of these SWAT vehicles and things like that. They may not be able to get that, but in terms of firepower, absolutely. And I mean, cops went from using revolvers to semi-automatics for a number of reasons, but one of them was that they were outgunned by gangs back in the early to mid-'80s. So not allowing the police access to this type of equipment, once again, will put them behind the eight ball. And they'll end up outgunned when serving warrants or going into a situation where they know that suspect or those suspects are likely to be heavily armed or in a fortified structure or things of that nature. So when you look at the type of equipment they want to stop the police from using, what they're then saying is that the military or the National Guard should take over those duties, which is just stupid. Because they are not trained to serve warrants. They are not trained in law enforcement. So you're just asking for trouble when you do stuff like that. And when you have veterans who have done those jobs in the military or have trained people to do those jobs, let the police have the means to get the job done. And to do otherwise is to say that their lives don't matter, which, frankly, when you think about everything that's happened, when you think about everything that's going on right now, that seems to be what they're saying. Think about it. George Floyd gets a funeral with thousands of mourners, 500 people in the church during the service, with no social distancing that I could see in the pictures I saw, and a $30,000 casket. Al Sharpton gives a eulogy to it for a guy he's never met, a fellow criminal. Yeah, I went there. And David Dorn has to have his mourners pay their respects socially distancing outside and can't be in the church for more than a certain amount of time. It's insane. And it proves once again that the left is trying to flip the script, so to speak. And only Black Lives Matter, according to them. I personally know someone whose father passed away in a nursing home. And the family couldn't be there when they found out he was sick. They couldn't be there when he died. And he couldn't have a funeral. His life mattered too. But this guy who held a gun to a pregnant woman's belly, granted years ago, and that's not what he was arrested for this time, but that's the type of person he was. But then this man who was a pillar of the community couldn't get a funeral because of the Chinese coronavirus. This is why they have such a hard time with people saying all lives matter, because to them, all lives don't matter. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here. Let me pull it back. But when you look at what's been going on for the past few years, even before President Trump won the election, but certainly after, if you look, you see a larger strategy at play. You have district attorneys in various big cities around the country, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Houston, Dallas. These DAs were backed and funded by George Soros and his organizations. And these DAs are notoriously soft on crime to the point of misfeasance. In a number of cases, they are refusing to prosecute convicted felons on additional gun crimes or even just theft. In fact, there was a murder case in Philadelphia where a young man was stabbed to death in public. The person who did it admitted to doing it. There was no question he did it. And initially was charged with first-degree murder. That charge was later downgraded to third-degree murder. And then, just days before the trial was to begin, the charges were downgraded again to manslaughter, which of course allowed that person who admitted to stabbing this young man to death, allowed him to walk free. He was acquitted. Pennsylvania is a shall issue state for licenses to carry, so I haven't heard anybody grumbling about how long it's taking or being denied, even though they meet the qualifications. So in that respect, there's really not a whole lot that they can do on that front in the state of Pennsylvania. But these other places where there are these Soros-installed district attorneys and city officials, they are trying to make the process to obtain a license to carry as painful and as burdensome as possible. Not only are they making it difficult to obtain carry permits, but they're trying to make certain firearms and certain classes of firearms illegal at the city, county, and state level, since they haven't been able to get it done on the federal level. They're getting rid of cash bail, so criminals who get arrested are released as soon as they're processed and then go out and commit more crime. They characterize protests against lockdowns as violent confrontations where not a single crime was committed, no windows were broken, no one was assaulted, shot, stabbed, nothing. But the riots that ensued after George Floyd's death were characterized as mostly peaceful.
Really just an ugly, dangerous scene at the state capitol in Michigan.
As we look at this extreme group of people, think those pictures and those clashes really show the chaos.
And you're out there with guns?
I don't want to call them rallies. They're not protests.
These quote-unquote protests. I don't even think that that's the right word because protests are supposed to be peaceful.
I'm not embarrassed to say that I was afraid.
It's not clear what they're demanding to infect other people, demanding to make other people sick.
It's dangerous, and these people can take this home with them and hurt their families and all the rest.
I'd like to ask them if they're willing to sign away their right to treatment if and when they get infected.
Who the hell do you think you are? I don't understand what is wrong with people. Stay at home.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
That ain't a riot, what we're seeing right now in Minneapolis.
Any reasonable person would say we shouldn't be destroying other people's property, but these are not reasonable times.
And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Now, you would think that Fredo Cuomo, having gone to law school, would be a little bit familiar with the Constitution and the First Amendment, where it says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. So it's right there in the First Amendment, Fredo. Protests are supposed to be peaceful. Now, one of the reporters you heard is Ali Vaishi. And please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name. But he was the one that said that the protests were mostly peaceful. Meanwhile, directly behind him, about 50 feet behind him, a building was on fire. Seriously? That's where we're at. I'd say that the Overton window is shifting. But in some respects, I think the Overton window has completely shattered. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the Overton window, real quick, very simplistic explanation. It's a concept in politics where there's a range of policies or ideas that are acceptable in society, and politicians can safely espouse these policies. And that range is what is referred to as the Overton window. But policies that society is less willing to accept and therefore could be politically costly, lie outside that window. And the left has been masterful over the years at shifting the window to make their agenda more palatable to the mainstream. But at the same time they're doing that, what they're doing is taking what used to be mainstream, and that is getting pushed further and further outside that window. There was a time when going to church and praising God and being taught the Bible in school and having prayer in school was the norm. Now, if you even attempt to bring something like that up, you're a religious fanatic. But this overarching strategy that I spoke about is geared toward bringing about the fundamental transformation of the country that Obama envisioned. For example, the police as a whole are being vilified while criminals are celebrated. Mothers killing babies is considered health care, and men pretending to be women are celebrated and considered brave. But when women correctly point out that men pretending to be women is a problem for actual women, they're vilified as well. Girls who don't want to compete against boys in a sporting event because they know that they are at a severe disadvantage are labeled transphobic bigots. Men who don't want to date a man pretending to be a woman is transphobic. J.K. Rowling was excoriated online for expressing views like that by men, and she wrote a fantastic piece on her website about her views and how she's been canceled for expressing them in this cancel culture. And you should go read it. J.K. Rowling and I have absolutely nothing in common politically, except perhaps this. There may be some other issues out there on which she and I align, but frankly, I never would have expected us to align on this, because she is as hardcore a leftist as you would expect among the celebrity class. But it's all a part of this strategy to bring down the country, to transform it into the socialist utopia that they've been promising for years, but not the rainbows, unicorns, and free stuff utopia that they want us to believe they're going to give us. Rather, the reality that people like you and I who are paying attention know would be coming should they gain the ability to implement their agenda, where citizens are afraid of the criminals who are allowed to run free, afraid of the government that allows it and then punishes people who disagree, who express any type of dissent. The term Orwellian gets often overused, but so much of what is depicted in Orwell's novel 1984 is basically unfolding right before our eyes, and it is terrifying. And if you're paying attention to what's going on and you're not terrified, then I'm going to go out on a limb and say you have not read the book. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and when we get back, I'm going to talk about something else that's been bothering me about this whole situation. We'll be right back. So one of the things that is irritating me more than most things about this entire situation, and there are a number of them, but for purposes of this discussion, one of the things that has been getting on my last nerve is this phenomenon of white people kneeling and asking forgiveness of black people for being white or for their privilege or something. But it got really ridiculous when I started seeing cops kneeling in solidarity with the movement.
I'm supposed to be out of town this weekend with my wife. I took off today, this weekend, but I'm out here to make sure y'all safe. Okay. Don't go there with respect, okay? Okay, thank you. I have much respect, but I only kneel for one person. And that's God. God, and thank you, Pastor. But what about...
Amen, brother. Do not kneel. There is no need to kneel to show solidarity. Do not bow before the rage mob. Good cops understand what happened to George Floyd was a tragedy and should never have happened. Come on. So whenever I see, and I've seen a ton of pictures and ton of video of cops kneeling. I saw one video though of a cop yanking up another cop from his knees because he was kneeling. It was like, no, do not kneel. But in Seattle, they've gone and they've taken it a step further and just abandoned one of their precincts. Antifa and BLM terrorists, they were going at it with the cops in the Capitol area, throwing bricks, bottles, rocks, even IEDs, which stunned me. And I was like, what are they talking about? IEDs? I mean, fireworks or something like that. But a Seattle police officer who has decided to leave stated that an IED detonated near him and ripped the leather of his danners. Now, if you know anything about boots that police officers wear, danners are expensive. I'd be pissed. Not only that an explosive device went off near me, but that it ripped a hole in my $350 boots. Anyway, this is part of a letter that he wrote explaining why he's leaving. Quote, I've also hit and or sprayed more people in that time than in the previous 7 years of my career. The damage done to my community trust will take a decade to unfuck. That's a technical term. I love the city that I was born in, but I'm done. I was used as cannon fodder, then blamed for inciting the violence. I've visited fellow officers in the hospital, and we have 45 out on injuries, but the narrative is the crowds were nonviolent and cops are the problem. Quick question before we get into that. How is the behavior described in that letter and everything that we've been seeing over the past few weeks in the streets of Minneapolis, Atlanta, and so forth? First Amendment protected speech and expression. But armed citizens who broke no laws, assaulted no one, and cleaned up after themselves are violent and a threat to democracy. Do me a favor and think on that for a bit. Now, the mayor of Seattle made the decision to abandon the East Precinct in what has now become the People's Republic of Chaz, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. And Chief Carmen Best's statement in response to this seemed heartfelt, and it made her a somewhat sympathetic figure. The chief serves at the pleasure of the mayor, and I'm sure if she didn't do what she was told, she'd have been fired. But then she pretty much threw up her hands and said, oh well.
Our 911 response times have tripled in the area. They've gone from just over 5 minutes to about 18 minutes.
Rapes, robberies, and all sorts of violent acts that have been occurring in the area that we're not able to get to. So it is not right for us not to be able to deploy our officers here.
I really have to wonder what her background is. Did she spend any time actually patrolling the streets and making arrests? Or did she go the admin command track and rise up through the ranks that way? Because her attitude since she was forced to abandon that precinct seems pretty cowardly to me. Instead of just accepting that the response times have tripled, before it reached that pitch, she should have reached out to neighboring jurisdictions or to the state police for assistance. And even if they say no, at least she can say that she's actually trying to find a solution. But that statement was pathetic. So as far as I'm concerned, she's no longer a sympathetic figure. She's a coward. Which is probably why the officer whose statement I read partially a few minutes ago is leaving. So when the police abandoned the precinct and allowed the terrorists to take control of the area, we saw some classic leftist hypocrisy in action. Because one of the first things they did was build a wall. Then they required ID to enter. They installed armed guards to patrol the area. All of the things that they don't like about the United States and conservative proposals on our borders, they implemented in what is now supposedly their new country. A 6-block area around the Capitol called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or Chaz, or as I like to call it, the People's Republic of Chaz. I mean, they renamed the police station. They spray painted over the word police, Peoples. Now, I've thought a lot about this since all this happened. And I know that some people are advocating for the feds to step in and take control, wrest it away from the terrorists. And I understand the instinct. I understand why that would make sense to some people. And I mean, it does make sense. It does make sense to do it. But I think if anyone steps in to wrest control away from them, it should be state authorities, the state police, the National Guard. But Jay Inslee is the governor, and considering his weak sauce response when he was asked about this takeover and how he hadn't even heard about it, come on, he heard about it. but he put that weak sauce response out there, I doubt he would ever order the state police or National Guard to go in and take care of business. And frankly, I don't want him to. I don't want him to. Let Chaz thrive or fall on its own merits, or, as it appears, lack thereof. They set up free food and supplies, and they invited a bunch of homeless people. And guess what happened? All the homeless people took all the food. They were supposed to be this self-sustaining utopia where all the demands that they wanted from the United States are going to be implemented, right? So they invite all the homeless people. The homeless people take all the food. They tweeted out from some not a blue check mark on Twitter, some Twitter account from there. The homeless people we invited took away all the food at the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. We need more food to keep the area operational. Please, if possible, bring vegan meat substitutes, fruit, oats, soy products, etc. Anything to help us eat. Oh my goodness. They're begging for food. Oh, that's hilarious. That is hilarious. If they had some corn-fed boys over there eating steak, they might have been able to keep that food instead of letting all the homeless people take it. But they got soy boys guarding the food stores. Oh, that's too funny. But it gets better. It actually gets better. So since the food supplies were stolen, they decided they'd plant their own food. They planted a garden, and what they did was they dropped some topsoil on top of some grass and then tried planting food. Wow. They didn't till the grass. They nothing. Sorry about that. That was my pup Jethro letting everybody know he's here. He was sleeping, but I think that was a yawn. Thanks, buddy. But anyway, as I said, this was an auspicious start. And this is all under the leadership of a rapper, Raz, I think his name is, who's been described since he seized power as a warlord. Yep, Jethro's awake. Anyway, I think we can safely say that this is not going to end well for Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and whoever else is participating in this madness. But how do you think it's going to end for them? Do you think that the citizens who are caught up in the area, because there are some residences, I think they said 500 residences in that area. Do you think those residents are going to rise up and throw them out? Do you think some armed citizens from outside the area are going to come in and try to take it over? Now, I have heard that the Hells Angels and the Mongols, which are two rival motorcycle clubs, are headed there to try and take it back. Now, as entertaining as that could be, I hope that doesn't turn into what it could, because it could be a bloodbath. And if it did, those soy boys and girls of Chaz would not have a prayer. Anyway, but leaving that possibility aside, do you think that the state or the feds are gonna finally step in and take control back? I think it's going to come down to them giving up because it's failing so miserably, or the state is going to step in and clear the area and give it back to the people. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and take another quick break. And when we get back, we will touch on this issue of systemic racism again, and then get you out of here with some bizarre, truly bizarre statements from some all too familiar voices. We'll see you on the other side. So we're not gonna dive too deeply into this. I think we've covered it quite a bit over the past couple of weeks. My position on it is quite clear, but I've been trying to get through people's heads that there is no such thing as systemic or institutional racism. And many smart black folks, some of whom are much smarter than I, have tried to tell us that. And whenever I ask for examples of it, we get nebulous answers like, it's inherent bias. People who have it don't even realize it, or that they benefit from it. In one Twitter exchange, I got, all you need to do is look at how officers treat black people. Their gut reaction is to control/contain them. It's sick. Well, where do you get that? What evidence do you have of that? And in that same Twitter exchange later on, when things get better for the least of our society, they get better for everyone. So what he's saying is that black folks are the least of society. So that particular individual is a racist. But these nebulous, emotion-laden, all you have to do is look type answers are complete BS. Meanwhile, I've actually been told that the facts and data that I present are appreciated, but it should be, they don't understand how I don't have an emotional tie to some of these issues, and that the emotional part should be considered as well. And it's not that I don't have any emotions associated with these issues, but the fact is that my emotions are not going to solve anything. My emotions aren't going to prove or disprove any of these assertions. In order to do that, you need facts. And if you're going to accuse someone of racism, systemic or otherwise, you better have something more than an emotional argument. Now, that Twitter exchange I just told you about, he came right out and said that black people are the least of us. So I can safely say that that person is a racist. But with the concept of systemic or institutional racism, all of the systems and institutions are controlled by the left. Law enforcement. In these poor areas run by Democrat governors, mayors, city councils, etc., these rundown, crime-infested neighborhoods, all run by leftists. Hollywood. Come on. Hollywood is leftist through and through. They gave child molester Roman Polanski a standing ovation for crying out loud. Government. Despite the fact that the president is a Republican and the Senate is barely a majority Republican, it's still controlled by leftists. Because if it was controlled by conservatives, a whole lot would be different. We wouldn't be going through this right now. The corporate world, all the big money donations are going towards leftist causes. Yes, conservatives have some millionaires and billionaires, obviously. But when you check out the big money donations and you look at who the donors are and where the money is going, the biggest, the big money donations, and I don't remember what the proportion is off the top of my head. I haven't looked in a while, but overwhelmingly going to Democrats. And the media in Hollywood pretty much go hand in hand. And all you have to do is watch CNN or MSDNC read any of the online publications, any of the online news publications, with few exceptions, skew wildly to the left. Education, academia. If you look at the university system, 99% of the tenured professors donate to Democrat candidates. There is not a single system or institution controlled by conservatives. Some may have more conservative input than others, but by and large, there is not a single system or institution controlled by conservatives. And conservatives are supposed to be the racists. But leftists control all of this stuff. And they're supposed to be the tolerant ones who are not racist. But if they're the ones controlling all these systems and institutions, and they can fix this so-called institutional racism, systemic racism, why haven't they? Why haven't they fixed it? How can they possibly blame it on President Trump or blame it on conservatives? And if they're the ones that have been voted into these offices over the past 50, 60 years, 70 years, then why is there still institutional racism? How could that possibly be? They should have eradicated it by now. I cannot wait to hear the mental gymnastics that leftists are going to go through to try and explain that one. That's going to be something to behold. But anyway, we're running out of time, so let's get you out here with a couple of I don't even some of this stuff is sad. Some of it's just I don't even know what to say. But first, let's listen to a couple of things that Joe Biden had to say at his roundtable discussion in Philadelphia.
Trump may have forgotten about coronavirus, but he hadn't forgotten about us. And we have 20 million unemployed. You all know that. And the failure to respond to the pandemic, I think the federal government has abdicated any effective leadership role. The White House, at least, has abdicated that role. You know, the rapidly rising I don't know.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is just sad. His family, I mean, this is borderline abuse. I mean, he had notes. He was looking at notes. If you watch the video, he's got notes all splayed out in front of him, and he still loses his train of thought. But that's not all. I mean, I'm just going to leave that one there. But here's another one that's just bizarre.
But even Dr. King's assassination did not have the worldwide impact that George Floyd's death did.
That he said a criminal's death had more of an impact than Martin Luther King Jr.'s death did is not even the worst part. The worst part is that if you listen closely, you can hear people agreeing with him. What? Okay. I don't even know how to respond to that. So let's move on to Mayor Lightfoot. Now, Mayor Lightfoot was on a conference call with all of the aldermen of Chicago. And an alderman, one of them asked her a question about what they were going to do about rioters if they decided to leave the downtown area and go into the neighborhoods.
My fear is once they're done looting and rioting and whatever's going to happen tonight, God help us, what happens when they start going after residents, going into the neighborhoods? Once they start trying to break down people's doors who they think they got something, or, we know that people are here to antagonize and incite, and you've got them all pumped today, they're not going to go to bed at 8 o'clock. They're going to turn their focus in the neighborhoods. I've got gangbangers with AK-47s walking around right now, just waiting to settle some scores. what are we going to do and what do we tell our residents other than good faith people stand up? It's not going to be enough.
Thank you, Alderman. Next question.
That was only about the last 40 seconds of what was a 2-minute explanation and question. And all she said was, thank you, next question. Well, as you can imagine, that did not go over too well.
No, I want an answer. You commented on everybody. I want an answer. It's not something you ignore. This is a question that I have.
I think you're 100% full of shit is what I think. If you think
no offense, well, f*** you then. Who are you to tell me I'm full of shit?
And if you think we were not ready and we stood by and let the neighborhood go up, there's nothing intelligent that I can say to you.
Well, maybe you should come out and see what's going on.
One of the stupidest things I have ever heard. I understand you want to preen. I understand that you think that you...
Mayor, you need to check your fucking attitude. That's what you need to do. Because right now, no, you need to check your attitude. Wait a minute. I'm being disrespectful. She just told me I'm full of shit.
Wow. Can you believe that? She is desperately trying to take de Blasio's title of worst mayor in the country. And she's doing a bang up job. He's miles ahead of her, but she's working hard. I'll give her that. But anyway, I'm just going to leave that there because, I mean, way to stay classy, Madam Mayor. Way to stay classy. Anyway, folks, that is our show. I do want to thank you all for listening and spending this time with me today. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, leave a review, and let us know what you think. Hit us up in the comment section. We're on YouTube. You can't see me. We haven't worked out the video aspect yet, but it is getting synced up to YouTube, so you can leave comments on the videos there. You can hit us up on social media at The Liberty Cast, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Parlay. Check us out on the website, thelibertycast.net. You can also find us on therightway.site. Go to the podcast page and you'll find us there as well. But anyway, folks, I do want to thank you all once again for listening. And as usual, even more so in these days, please, everybody, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe.